Moist cooking methods, or cooking methods in general. It's very, very important to understand all these, because once you understand them, then you can properly use them for whatever you want your end result to be. So let's start with moist cooking methods. Moist cooking method number 1, 2, 3, and 4. The biggest cooking methods: we're going to boil, we're going to simmer, we're going to poach, we're going to steam. Those 4 are fairly interchangeable, and the difference is simply a matter of degrees and how submerged the product actually is. So if we look inside of our pot here, you can see that the water is boiling. Now, to get the water to this point, I'll turn the heat up high and I'll put a lid on top of it. That way the temperature will be controlled in there. It'll be all that steam and all that escaping heat will be captured, and it'll heat up a lot faster. Now, a lot of times you'll hear an old wives' tale that if you salt the water, it'll actually increase the temperature, it'll boil faster. Not true. What it does is, the reason that we add salt to things, so if I was to add salt to the water now, you can see that it kind of flares up real quick. That's because the salt breaks the surface tension of the water and it does a real brief flare up. But it actually only changes the degrees by like tenths. It's not real noticeable, and it's not very applicable in this case. So what we want to do is we get everything basically to boiling. So if I'm going to simmer vegetables or simmer anything, then I would start by boiling it, okay? Well, you can notice now that I've turned the heat down. Now this is more of a simmer, okay? Where they're just gently kind of rolling bubbles, that's a simmer. That's the ideal cooking temperature for things, because it's not real rapid and it's not just destroying everything that's in there. Now, if I was to reduce the amount of water in here and just have a little bit, so if I was to drop broccoli in here right now, you know what I would be doing? I'd be boiling broccoli, or I'd be simmering broccoli. Now, if I dropped the level of the water down to where it wasn't totally submerging the broccoli and I put a top on it, I would actually be steaming it or poaching it. Poaching and steaming are generally two side-by-side ideas. You poach salmon, you steam vegetables. It's basically the same thing though. You just call it different things for different products. Same thing as baking and roasting. When we get into baking and roasting, we'll talk about the differences there and how there's really not much of a difference. So remember that when you're using these moist cooking methods, that you get everything to a boil first, and then once you introduce your product, it'll actually decrease the temperature of your water in there to where you're actually simmering. So it works out just perfect. And then remember that by steaming, we'll just reduce the amount of water in there so that it's not totally encompassed by it, but that it's steam cooking it instead of being totally surrounded by water. Keep these cooking methods in mind. These are really good for vegetables and delicate items because it'll cook very, very fast, but it'll also cook it in a gentler way to where you're not totally breaking it apart and caramelizing that outside. Moist cooking methods, good things to know, great things to use.